I'm Ernabel Demillo. Science and You starts now.
I'm Mike Gilliam. Major medical breakthroughs and new procedures are prolonging the lives of pets. They don't come cheap. We'll show you some of the amazing cutting-edge technology and talk to pet owners who have benefited from them. That's ahead on Science and You.
I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson. They're the largest known animals to have ever lived on this earth. Do you want to see what they look like? Join us for a trip back in time on Science and You.
I'm Anne Riddell. You may have one of these in your kitchen, the humble spud, but did you know it can be a science teacher? That's ahead on Science and You.
Hi, I am Marlene Peralta. Do you know what Broadway shows and NASA have in common? I'll tell you ahead on Science and You.
2 tickets to space, please. Now that may sound a little far-fetched to a regular citizen like me and you, but some scientists say space tourism could be a booming business in our lifetime. I'm Ernabel Demillo, and I'll have that story coming up on Science and You.
I'm Grant Greenberg. As we speak, a huge asteroid is heading to Earth. You have to check it out next on Science and You.
I'm Mike Gilliam. From cancer treatments to 3D imaging to stents for cats and dogs, veterinarians here at the Animal Medical Center are going high-tech to save the family pet. They are using technology to do great things at the Animal Medical Center in Manhattan, even using some equipment you might not see yet in your local hospital catering to humans. This pooch has a tumor and is undergoing a 3-dimensional CAT scan. Veterinarian Anthony Fischetti says a contrasting agent is introduced to check the tumor's progress.
The machine is so smart that it knows when the contrast goes by, and it'll light up the arteries that we're interested in like a Christmas tree. We'll be able to see it in relationship to the tumor that's around it, potentially, or the clot that's around it.
As a vet, what does it mean for you to have equipment like that?
It's amazing.
Fischetti says the equipment, which is cutting-edge technology, cost a little over $1 million to purchase and install. He says it was donated to the not-for-profit center, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary, by a person whose pet was treated at the hospital.
It is very rare in veterinary medicine to have a machine that's that capable.
Where many animal care providers use MRIs and X-rays to take a peek inside a patient to see what's wrong, vets at the Animal Medical Center, where they see 40,000 pets a year, are going a few steps farther and using the equipment in real time as part of their treatment. Meet Mimi. She's a 5-year-old Ocicat who looks perfect but is unable to breathe through her nose. Her owner says she can't smell food or exercise because she was born with scar tissue covering the passageway between the nose and mouth, forcing her to breathe through her mouth, something cats have a hard time doing.
She can't eat because when you eat, you're holding your breath or you're using your nose to breathe if there's food in your mouth. So every bite she takes, she then has to stop, breathe, and take another bite.
After spending thousands on emergency care, Mimi's owner, Elise Smith, traveled all the way from California to save her.
So because she can't breathe out of her nose, she would find a shoe and put her mouth on a shoe, on a bowl, on a bag, anything she could find to put her mouth on so it would keep her mouth open and she could breathe through her mouth. So she's learned to adapt.
In the past, the fix would require major surgery, but not anymore. Breakthroughs in science and veterinary medicine are allowing these vets to perform a non-invasive procedure to correct the problem that might not have been attempted just a decade ago.
So what we were able to do is right through her nostril without any surgery and with a scope and real-time x-ray, we were able to place a stent in that area, so in that nasal passage. And in that nasopharynx, by putting a stent in, we were able to open up all of that scar tissue, so now air can pass freely.
The procedure successful, much to the delight of Elise, who has no problem with the approximately $4,000 to $5,000 she's spending, on top of the $5,000 she says she's already spent on emergency care.
We now have access to technology that could make animals feel better, get out of the hospital, spend more time at home, and there's money involved, but knowing that they get them home sooner and they have a good quality of life means everything to people.
There's so much more that goes on here at the Animal Medical Center. After undergoing some of these treatments, many of the pets are placed in rehab using tools like this. It's an underwater treadmill. This is Kofi. After undergoing 2 knee surgeries, owner Allison Paul put him in rehab to regain lost movement. We saw him on the underwater treadmill. Has it worked?
Yeah, it has worked. His vet has saw him from behind and said she can't get over how well he's walking since he's been in rehab.
This has become a trend. More and more people are starting to expend the money needed to keep the pet healthy. That must have been your situation as well. What went into your decision?
I wanted to do whatever I could for him. He was so young when he hurt his knee that I couldn't really see him being a puppy and not having the best quality of life that he could have. And I felt like the Animal Medical Center really was able to give him that.
For me, that just provides such, a beautiful thing for the owner and for the pet. And seeing that challenge of where we can go with this is just amazing to me. And that keeps us excited every day.
So, while these new procedures can be costly, pet owners we talk to say the money is well worth it when it comes to saving or prolonging the life of a pet that's become part of the family. I'm Mike Gilliam for Science and You.
I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson. We're here at the American Museum of Natural History for the world's largest dinosaurs exhibit. This show isn't about just fossils and bones, but rather it'll take you into a world revealing just how these dinosaurs, known as sauropods, once lived. This is one creature that has to be seen to be believed. Dinosaurs. These great, terrifying creatures were tailor-made for big-screen horror films. But these giant beasts roam the prehistoric world millions of years before any humans, including filmmakers, stood upright on the earth. And it's now clear that while we thought we knew something about them, we were way off.
We know that most of these animals were, carnivorous dinosaurs, including Tyrannosaurus rex, had feathers.
Mark Norell is a paleontologist and is the curator of the world's largest dinosaur exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History. He's been studying these creatures for over 20 years.
We know that these animals, at least the theropod dinosaurs, again, that some of them brooded their nests just like living birds do and sat on top of their eggs. With these kinds of animals, I think one of the neat things is that people have sort of figured out why their necks were so long, because it was always traditionally depicted that they were like giraffes, sort of plucking foliage from the tops of trees. But if you take the bones and you try to put them together like that, they don't fit together. They only fit together sticking straight out.
We're learning more and more about the daily life of these fascinating animals, right down to their diets. These were herbivores,
right?
Correct? So, vegetarian diet.
Yeah, well, it's one of the really unanswered questions about these things, is how that they could maintain the kind of rates of growth that they were able to maintain just eating a vegetarian diet. And it's still, even though that there's a lot of calculations which have been done and figuring out exactly how much these animals had to eat, it was an amazing amount.
Amazing is putting it mildly.
Yeah, that's an hour's food, and this is a day's food.
This is what in a single day.
In a single day.
What they consumed.
What they consumed.
And could you give us the dimensions?
It's about 5.5 feet.
The exhibit also shows all the fascinating aspects of the animal. Another eye-opening factoid: how quickly they grew. So this is what we're seeing here?
Yeah, that's what you're seeing here. So if you compare that to a human, it takes 5 months for a human baby to double its weight. And then it takes another 2 years for it to be 4 times its weight. It's only 16 times its weight when it's about 16, 17 years old. And a sauropod can do that in 2 months.
Visitors can also experience the recreation of a gigantic sauropod, with one side showing its skeleton and the other its anatomy, all while actually feeling the vibration of the breathing creature.
We wanted to really show this as not just a model, but as a living organism. And the way it would look that if you were in biology class and that you had one of these things and you were doing a dissection of it, and you wanted to find out things about how it breathed, about its reproductive system, about its stomach, about where the food went, how its stomach differs from the human stomach, and all those sorts of things. So that it just gives, I think, that the museum visitor a chance to appreciate these things as living animals and not just as bones.
The sauropod on display is huge, larger than any living African elephant of today. Even so, the one here is half the size of what the largest dinosaur was. The museum simply didn't have a room large enough for a recreation that big.
What's notable about this one, though, is that this animal, which lived about 125 million years ago in China, is, or what's now China, it has the longest neck proportional to the body size of any of the sauropod dinosaurs.
Thanks to advances in science, an understanding of these extinct giants is also a major part of this exhibit. And while an excavation dig may not be in your travel plans, there is one offered right here at the museum, so visitors can actually see for themselves how dinosaurs are discovered out in the field. The world's largest dinosaurs is now open through January 2nd of next year at the American Museum of Natural History. I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson for Science and You.
I'm Anne Riddell. It started out with a dad, his son, and a fascination with potato chips. But what does that have to do with science? Take a look.
What is your favorite snack food, guys?
Chips. Chips.
What kind of chips?
Potato chips.
Well, let's see if we can come up with a little science experiment, one or two maybe, involving potato chips. Now, if I had a scientific bag of potato chips, that might be possible. Well, what do we have here?
Snacks and science, an unusual but tasty pairing cooked up by inventor Alan Kurzweil and his chip-loving son, Max. Their creation, potato chip science.
Just your ordinary bag of potato chips, or so it seems, until you dump everything out.
Whoa! Okay. The kit includes supplies and a 96-page book of experiments designed to get kids snacking on science and leave them hungry for more.
The entire package, right down to the bag, is repurposed, reused in the experiments. And my hope is that kids will start looking at the packaging that they usually throw in the garbage can differently, not as garbage or trash, but as an opportunity. I want them to realize that science is lurking everywhere, in the recycling bin, in a bag of potato chips. I think it's important that they start seeing that they can create really cool stuff with the simplest of objects found all around the house.
What kind of cool stuff? Potato chip tubes become bird feeders.
You put the bird feed inside here.
Walkie-talkies and a confetti cannon. So what do you guys think of potato chip science?
Chip-tacular!
Moving to physics, a lesson on potential and kinetic energy using a chip-mobile powered by breath. The propulsion pipe is a great way to teach kids about Boyle's law. The concept, volume and pressure are inversely related.
The simplicity of the propulsion pipe, the fact that it's completely transparent, allows the kids to see what happens when those plugs get closer and closer together. The volume gets smaller and smaller, the pressure builds, and then there's that satisfying pop.
The lesson, science experiments really can be found in the most ordinary of places, including your kitchen and even a bag of chips. I'm Anne Riddell for Science and You.
Earth is the only planet in the solar system where oxygen can be found.
Hi, I'm Ernabel Demillo. New York City, one of the top tourist destinations in the world. Can outer space be next? Well, according to some scientists, a booming space tourism industry is not that far off.
It's been a nice ride in space, and I'm really glad I had you at the launch.
Don't call him an astronaut. New Jersey resident Dr. Greg Olson is a space tourist, a scientist and entrepreneur who paid top dollar to blast off into space.
Yeah, I guess I always dreamed about space, but I also dreamed about playing Major League Baseball like every other kid in the United States. And you know, I guess I just sort of really thought it was always going to be a dream, and then at 60 years old, I get into space.
Dr. Olson is one of a handful of private citizens who have paid millions for an opportunity to hang out at the International Space Station. Olson devoted close to 2 years on his space mission, including 8 months of training in Russia. He then spent 8 days in the International Space Station.
You see a nice picture of the world. It's fabulous. I mean, to be able to float You know, it's an experience, it's difficult to reproduce on Earth. I mean, they have zero-G flights where you can achieve weightlessness for maybe 20, 30 seconds. But to really be at equilibrium and floating is weightless. It's just fabulous. After the birth of my daughter's best experience of my life.
And soon, regular people will have access to outer space. Well, regular people with a couple of $100,000 to spare. Several private companies are testing a variety of spacecraft for space tourists. Meanwhile, workers are putting the finishing touches on a $200 million spaceport in New Mexico, where billionaire Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic flights are scheduled to take off one day. They have glide tested their spacecraft, Spaceship Two, a number of times. Very soon, they're going to be operating rockets on it, which will allow it to go up to a height of about 62 to 63 miles and return to Earth repeatedly. Their hope is to repeat missions frequently. For this, space tourists will get 10 minutes of space travel and astronaut wings. Dr. Gregory Matloff, a CUNY physics professor and NASA consultant for more than 25 years, believes space exploration is vital for our survival.
We can mine these things. We can utilize their materials to do something like build sunshades in space, maybe, to cut down on global warming a little bit, or solar power satellites to beam energy down. Both of these would have a positive effect on our civilization.
What do you think of the future of space tourism?
Oh, it's a really great future, and I'm up for it. I support it, and I see it coming just around the corner.
Dr. Olson says he would love to go back, but he's thinking bigger, or should I say further. Would you go up to Mars?
Oh, sure. I'd leave today. I just love it and love doing it.
I'm Ernabel Demillo for Science and You.
The International Space Station has racked up over 1.7 million miles of travel in its 10-year history.
I am Marlene Peralta. When one thinks about designers, the first thing that comes to mind is trendy clothes, dresses, accessories, and even shoes. But what about those who work around science? In the spacesuit technology, for example. I spoke with Ted Southern, who is a New York City artist and who recently won second place at NASA's Astronaut Glove Challenge. How did you go about designing a glove that actually outperforms NASA's current technology?
Well, it was a collaborative process. I work with a Russian man named Nikolai Moiseev, who worked for the Russian Space Agency for a long time. So I'm lucky to have a very talented partner when you're in space and no atmosphere, or in planets with microatmosphere, you end up having the pressure differential, and so the suits become quite stiff. And so part of our design is dealing with that stiffness, but there are thermal issues, there are micrometeoroid issues, and then there's all kinds of techno issues as far as regulating temperature.
To deal with the lack of flexibility in space, Ted says hands become key to achieve mobility.
If you think about astronauts in the International Space Station, they're in almost no gravity, and so they actually walk with their hands. The mobility in their lower torso, their legs, and their boots are actually constricted so that they can remain more stable on platforms like robotic arms. But their hands become very important because it's not only how they manipulate whatever they're doing out there, disconnecting ammonia lines or dealing with solar arrays, but then they also actually walk with them. So their hand usage is very important.
Ted and Nick collaborated on the astronaut glove for almost a year, although they were thousands of miles apart.
He lives in Moscow. The glove competition in November was actually my second competition. There was a first one in 2007 that I participated in as part of my thesis for my MFA. And Nikolai was my competitor in 2007. So we actually met on the drive back to New York City. I gave him a ride back from the competition, and we became good friends, and he asked me to collaborate with him for this year's competition.
And it all finally came together when they both unveiled a full spacesuit they call Frontier Prime at I-Beam Studios, where Ted is doing his residency program.
The first part that's so special is that it was built by 2 people. Normally a spacesuit takes a team of hundreds, I think the current budget for NASA for the new Constellation suit is $750 million. We built this for under $10,000. Our goal at this point is to make something that is a cost-effective space tourist pressure suit. Of course, safety is a prime concern, and that's something that we'll be dealing with going forward with NASA protocol.
But how did these Brooklyn artists make a connection between arts and science?
It was maybe subconscious direction that I headed in. It seemed like every piece I was doing, even before the gloves, people would have that question, is this art or is this science? And it wasn't something then or now that I'm sort of interested in defining. I don't think that it needs that particular definition. You know, it's especially gratifying as an artist to go to this NASA competition and sort of compete with real scientists. And so it's comfortable for me to have a foot in both worlds.
Aside from NASA, Ted's artistic versatility have reached the big screen, Broadway, and even Saks Fifth Avenue.
I just worked on the Addams Family with Basil Twist, who's a famous puppeteer.
Ted has a master's degree in sculpture, chosen because of his obsession with the human body, an obsession that is definitely reflected in every single one of his creations.
I do work with the hands in particular. I've been a little obsessive about how much I make for hands. And they're a particular interest to me, partly because I've injured my hands a couple times, partly because I'm an instrumentalist and your hands end up being a large part of how you play music. But it's also more fundamentally sort of how we interact with the world, how we change the world is through our hands.
What started at the NASA Globe competition has turned into a long-term partnership between Ted and Nick. They now own a company together called Final Frontier Design. Their mission is to provide the most up-to-date spacesuit garments. For Science and You, I am Marlene Peralta.
NASA has discovered the first asteroid that shares the same orbit as Earth. Called a Trojan asteroid, it will never be closer than 20 million miles to Earth.
I'm Grant Greenberg for Science and You. What may seem like a scene out of a science fiction movie is more of a reality than you even realize. Right now, there is a huge asteroid heading toward Earth. You need to see the size of this thing, the damage it could do, and also what scientists are doing to stop it.
Imagine the Empire State Building flying out of the sky and crashing into Earth. Meet Apophis, a 25-ton asteroid about the size of the city's largest building. Scientists say the asteroid is basically a small planet that orbits the sun on its own axis, much like Earth. However, Apophis is out of orbit and has 2 chances to hit Earth, April 13th, 2029 or 2036. Scientists say asteroids have hit Earth before and are most likely to blame for the mass extinction of dinosaurs 65 million years ago. In 1908, a meteor 1/5 the size of Apophis exploded over Siberia, flattening an unpopulated area that's bigger than all 5 boroughs combined. Apophis would bring with it as much energy as 65,000 nuclear bombs, and the devastation would depend on where it hits. Right on land, or if in water, it would create tidal waves. Here's a closer look at the path NASA expects Apophis to take, missing Earth by more than 18,000 miles. But that's still considered a close call, and scientists aren't taking any chances. Asteroids may naturally break apart and shrink in size. If they don't, scientists are working on ways to protect us, like building solar sails they can send into space that may break Apophis or other asteroids apart or steer them away. We spoke with New York Tech physics professor Dr. Greg Matloff. He's consulted for NASA and is an expert on solar sails.
Okay, a solar sail is the simplest form of space propulsion. It is nothing more or less than a very flat sheet, a very thin aluminized material. It's highly reflective, it should be temperature tolerant, and it should also be fairly strong. Basically, it is propelled by the pressure of sunlight. You can do a number of things with a solar sail on an asteroid to divert it. One You can basically coat it around the asteroid. Basically, imagine I have a potato here. I put aluminum foil and toothpicks all around it. This would increase the area of the object and also increase its reflectivity. Because solar photons of light, have a momentum or a push, this will change the orbit. It's basically propelling it. You're converting it into a large spacecraft. We almost certainly will be hit at some point. Earth's odds are going to run out. Little things hit us all the time, but someday a big one will.
While Apophis is getting most of scientists' attention, there are many more asteroids out there. NASA's Hubble telescope tracked down hundreds of small ones. Asteroids like Matilda, Gaspra, and Ida aren't the size of Apophis, but are on NASA's radar.
Again, it may seem far away, but scientists say this could be a close call, and it's a good chance for them to test their tools and technology to help keep us safe. I'm Grant Greenberg for Science and You.
That's our show. I'm Ernabel Demillo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Science and You.